Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is February 9, 2021. And this is part 2 of a video I started a few days ago against the notion of a grand left-right political alliance, anti-establishment left-right alliance. We as socialists do not support such a thing as a general strategic move to, quote, oppose the establishment. This is a populist framing. Most specifically, this came out of a suggestion made by populist or right-wing social democrat Jimmy Dore, comedy news guy, YouTuber, has a fairly large channel. Used to be on the Young Turks progressive, air quotes, news show. And it's a really bad idea. Why? Who are right-wing populists? Basically fascists. We're anti-establishment. It's basically right-wingers, and usually extreme right-wingers, co-opting radical rhetoric to sound less like basic Republicans while advancing basic Republican economics for the most part with a kind of grab bag of like crazy oppressive social politics and then like a weird mix of like a few civil libertarian things thrown in there. But overall, this is a way to empower the right to pursue their goals of completely deregulated capitalism. That's called neoliberalism. The push is already well underway. And in fact, libertarianism, I mean, it is neoliberalism. The Libertarian Party emerged in the 1970s, around the same time that the ruling class was forming the neoliberal consensus. And the Libertarian Party was just another manifestation. Their emergence on the scene was another manifestation of this consensus within the ruling class to dismantle social democracy, deregulate, privatize, and defund. Deregulate industry, privatize industry, and defund the public sector and social programs. So that's where we are now. So how are libertarians anti-status quo? Well, they're not. But their rhetoric is designed to be confusing so that it can co-opt confused people who are not grounded. And they've had some success in doing that. We as Marxists, I don't want to lose a single person who is close to being a Marxist to a libertarian, because you literally are getting tricked into supporting the status quo with weed. Like, that's the libertarian pitch, basically. It's like, well, anyway, we'll come back to that. So the basic situation right now is the right is out of power. The far right is out of power. Democrats, who are also right-wing, admittedly, have taken government, and the Republicans are out there going, how do we, and the MAGA people, they're like, how do we get our agenda back into being the dominant one? And then the left is kind of a free agent. The social democratic left, and sort of air quotes populist left in particular. We'll come back to populism in a second. But basically was attached to Bernie Sanders. We at Socialism for All did support Bernie Sanders, but from the left as just maybe a positive development of like, the window shifting left. Maybe that's a coalition we can work within and, pull some more people, maybe not Bernie himself, but pull some people left and do, there was some action going on. Let's show up, let's agitate, educate, organize, and say, Bernie, yeah, it's a step left, but we really need to go further. And a lot of that actually did happen, and that was successful. Those are people you can talk to. Not all of them, but many of them. I mean, that's, as far as our target audience, people who are already kind of getting that we need to move left. The question is how left to move. Our answer is go to Marxism. So anyway, that has been successful. But after Bernie abandoned us and the Democratic Party has been, kicking the broader left, socialists, anarchists, social democrats, really however you identify, have been, not that those groups have everything in common, but you could say they're all on the broader left. The Democratic Party has been kicking us in the face for 5 years and making it super, super clear they don't want anything to do with the left. So the Republicans and the far right generally, now out of power, are trying to, get back in power. How are they going to do that? by trying to poach some people out of the disorganized and confused left. Now, people like, well, I can't say long-time listeners of Socialism for All, we've only been going for a year, but people who have been Marxists and are grounded in that for a while aren't going to be fooled by this. But some other people who are less grounded may get picked off, and you might wind up spending a few years supporting right-wing shit just because they kind of offered you a home in a deceptive way, etc. So, again, far right out of power, left politically homeless, also not in power. And so the wolves in sheep's clothing come over, the air quotes right-wing populists, basically, MAGA crazies, libertarians, that sort of thing, come over in various forms of overtures and say, hey, we should work together. We've got common ground. Well, no, we don't. We're going to go into that. What libertarians want in a nutshell, there's an old concept called the company town. What that was a town in the developing United States where the only real infrastructure in the town, pretty much everything revolved around a large factory, plant, company, office, headquarters, whatever. And like everything in that town revolved around it. And there was just a company store that the company owned. And the workers got paid in whole or in part in company script. What is company script? It's basically like if you've ever been to Disney World, Disney dollars. Like you can only spend them in the park. Well, that's company script, is you get paid in company currency and you can only spend it at the company store, thereby, perpetuating this cycle of dependency and privatized everything forever, total corporate tyranny. Now, we broke out of that. And, the United States did manage to, through intense labor struggles, beat back the power of the corporations. Labor never became the dominant power in the United States, but we became a somewhat successful counterpower for a while. We were able to articulate and assert and achieve some workers' rights and protections, and the more enlightened segments of the capitalist class went along with that, but they stayed in power the whole time. Make no mistake about that. We never had socialism. That's when the working class becomes the ruling class. But libertarians want to go back to the company town, except they want it to be global. They want a company planet, which indeed it will be, because with completely unrestrained capitalism, you get more and more monopolies, merging of companies. Capital tends to consolidate. So eventually you just get Mega World Corp that just is literally the only company in existence. It's like, straw men of what communism is all about, except it's privatized. It's privatized, and there's no alternative. You get paid in company script, and it's the global fucking currency. And that is basically the world libertarians want. Now, some of them, the rich ones who think that they can be on the top of the dung heap, they know that that's what they're advocating for. A lot of the ones who aren't quite so wealthy, have more working class or petty bourgeois interests, who would be crushed economically in such a, economically and in every other way in that kind of a scenario. They tend to join this coalition for various reasons that are not so obvious, to them. They'll get caught up in some part of the civil libertarian rhetoric or some of the, crypto nationalist, crypto fascist type of rhetoric that, we, the white working class, or we, the deserving petty bourgeois, or whatever, like we're going to be empowered by this somehow. These are reactionary parts of the population who want to turn the wheel of history back to a time before the current state of development, when, just industry wasn't as advanced as it is, and The economy wasn't planned at all, either publicly or privately. And it was just this kind of Wild West, thing of, I opened a business and this and that. Well, those days are kind of long gone. I mean, Amazon and companies like that are way more efficient. I mean, in terms of just the resources they command, the kind of planning that they're implementing is they can crush anyone. Some people may object to the word efficient there. What I mean is they can operate in an economy of scale that no one can compete with because they just have all the money and they can buy out any competitor, etc. So efficient is one thing, consolidated is another. They have just brought so much wealth and so many resources and just so much industry under their name and under their ownership that trying to compete with them, it's just not really possible. So we're headed to kind of one place. What libertarians want to do is remove all the regulations that would even slow that down. That's not going to be good for working people because Amazon's interest, the owners of the company, their economic interests are diametrically opposed to people working at the company, which, if Amazon had their way, would be everyone. So it would literally just be like this tiny minority of Amazon owners in our example here. We'll call Amazon like first in line right now to become Mega World Corp. And, the teeming masses who would be actually fulfilling all the orders and doing everything else. All the work, basically. So libertarians want company towns, privatized courts. Literally, you can look up libertarian private police, private courts. You will find eloquent 2-hour seminars on the subject of instituting a private justice system. Like, our complaints with the justice system now is it's already biased too much in favor of justice for all who can afford it. They literally would take overt steps to eliminate any pretense of it being anything other than that. And all of this goes back to stale, worn out, ultra cliche arguments about letting the market decide and, the market makes the most efficient decisions of distribution of resources, etc. Except when you break it down, this is a heavily anti-democratic idea because the idea of democracy is one person, one vote. The idea of capitalism is $1, one vote. The problem? Some people have a lot more dollars than others. Like, I believe the stock market is controlled, 75% of the stock market is controlled by 1% of the shareholders. So when you say let the market decide, that's who you're saying we should let decide. It's heavily anti-democratic. It's tyrannical. But libertarians, I genuinely think most of these people, there's something broken in their brain and they just can't or won't grasp this. It's like just watching these people go into denial deeper and deeper and deeper, where no matter what happens, as we go into neoliberalism, literally the agenda they want, every bad thing that happens, they blame it on socialism, even though we're so far from socialism right now, it's not even funny. But to them, again, there's just this faulty logic loop. It just gets routed into everything is socialism's fault, even though you know what I'm saying. Anyway, it's frustrating dealing with these people. So let's get into some comments. Basically, the last video I was responding to a few comments. And, I do moderate comments on this channel. I just find it's kind of easier that way. Somebody was like, oh, what if it turns into an echo chamber? Let me tell you that I will do videos like this if I see consistent complaints coming up or something like that, honestly, because it's interesting. I don't think YouTube comments are the most wholesome, or really any comments, whether it's Facebook or wherever. Comment sections tend to suck for the most part. So I do moderate comments, and that's just the way it is. It's the way it's going to be. I mean, there's like a Facebook group, not reading the comments is self-care. It's just, it's a lot of times it's gang warfare. But anyway, I do read the comments, consider it like letters to the editor. Say that 10 times fast. Probably not actually that hard, just having a brain fart. But letters to the editor. And, if a topic comes up a lot, we'll certainly talk about it. Anyway, let's get into the comments. So this was in response to my videos criticizing the left-right alliance idea. Somebody says, yeah, okay, I know that many who identify as Boogaloo, this is the Boogaloo Boy right-wing militia, have fascistic leanings. Many are also anti-fascist in their own way. And what way would that be? So specifically, the guy who Jimmy Dore had on his show, goes by the name right now of Magnus Panvidya, posted a meme that I featured before in videos where he puts up a communist flag and an anti-fascist flag, like the Antifa flag, and also like a Nazi flag, and is like, these are good for toilet paper. So you're trying to deal with people who think that actual fascism and actual anti-fascism are somehow equivalent. So I feel like being anti-fascist in your own way doesn't necessarily work all that well when you don't have the slightest clue what fascism is. Moving on with the same comment, I've met ones that want a freed market economy, i.e. totally deregulated capitalism. That's pretty much the one thing all libertarians agree on, because they see it as the most likely pathway to a system like fully automated luxury communism. Okay, except they're wrong. Like, as in completely 100% turned around 180 degrees wrong. And as socialists, we might want to object to that, and we might want to say, hey, I'm not working with you, until we can get remotely on the same page about that. It's basically what I'm saying. We'll come back to that. I've also met ones who actually endorsed capitalist oppression. What do you mean, actually? That's literally what they're all about. They are hyper-capitalist, anti-socialist, anti-social democracy, neoliberal, pro-robber baron. They oppose the minimum wage. They oppose Social Security. They oppose Medicare. They oppose any kind of government program. What do you mean actually endorsed capitalist oppression? There's no other possible result from what they're saying. And a lot of times it's not even that hidden. So, yeah, we're mincing words here when we say, oh, they actually are capitalists. Yeah. Welcome to the real world where we understand that libertarians want capitalism. I don't know how you could come away with any other possible conclusion. So on this notion, though, of I've met ones who want a free market economy because they see it as the most likely pathway to a system like what we call, jokingly, fully automated luxury communism, i.e. massive abundance, little work, and, just we're have more than enough. There's plenty for all, and we barely have to work for it because everything's so advanced and futuristic and cool. Yeah, that certainly is what we as socialists want. We see that technology is heading in that direction of being more and more productive. You're able to leverage labor time with technology to do more and more and more stuff until we are now entering the fourth industrial revolution of artificial intelligence, where just a tiny bit of human instruction or human input or human labor the machine is able to just run from there and fucking do it itself. So we're getting to a point where we can have all of our needs met without any work in at least some areas of industry. Everyone wants prosperity. That's not particular or exclusive to socialists or to anarchists or to feudalists in their day or to capitalists. Every common person walking the earth, regardless of religion or ideology, pretty much would like people to be materially comfortable, looked after, their needs met, materially. No one is walking around going like, I don't know, I think we should suffer. You know what I mean? Maybe there's some like ascetics who take that on for personal spiritual reasons, but like by and large, people, recognize like, hey, most people just want to live, have enough to eat, have a roof over their head, have some meaningful social interactions, have some meaningful creative expression or work expression, like however you're creative. Wanting prosperity is not unique. Okay, so saying that, oh, they're libertarians because they think capitalism will get them to prosperity. Yeah, that's kind of what we call that falling for basic capitalist propaganda. We need to correct it, not endorse it. This shouldn't be controversial. So they have bought into a lie. Libertarianism says, hey, we're going to bring you this high-tech future where the government gives everyone a girlfriend and like, all the other stuff these people believe. It's lies. We know damn well as socialists that capitalism gives you one thing, exploitation, and everything that goes along with it. So saying that, they want prosperity for all, okay, I mean, that is actually the default human position. But saying that capitalism is going to get us there is objectively wrong. And we need to correct them on that and don't actively enter a political alliance with them when every action they're going to take is going to take us further away from that. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because we're moving on to the next comment. So this one was kind of long. I'll just read the whole thing. Sincere question, but first a quick prologue. For me, imperialism is the keystone of capitalism. The wars for resource extraction and competition are the pillars upon which capitalism stands. The U.S. empire, as you aptly pointed out in your video, needed and needs wars to save itself from economic collapse, like during the Great Depression and World War II. And just a quick side note from me, yes, I'm actually going to do a video on the notion that the New Deal didn't end the Great Depression. It was the production for the war effort that ended the Great Depression. And ever since, we've been in a permanent war economy because the capitalists need that to keep their system running, as well as, just wars for oil and stuff like that. But it was originally, I mean, there's other things, competition between capitalist countries. I kind of think we're out of that phase at this point. Like, it's been firmly established that the U.S. would take over for Western nice, for Western European. I don't know if there's a connection there. The U.S. took over for Western European empires after World War II because Europe got really badly destroyed. Since then, since World War II, we haven't had any competitions between capitalist countries for who is going to be top dog. Basically, Germany tried twice to assert itself as top dog and got beaten back both times. Since then, the U.S. has been on top. So the U.S. was able to maintain a competitive advantage when there was still some sort of, international competition among capitalists. I would say we're past that stage at this point, and now it is really just the U.S. dominating weaker countries, not poorer countries, but weaker countries to get their resources and labor and things like that. But yeah, that it was World War II. Now, the New Deal did compress incomes, reduced inequality, did make capitalism more stable. That's not the question, though, is all of those things happened while the Depression was still going on. Capitalism still was having the crisis that it was having. And even if we went back to social democracy today with some of those regulations, it would still have a lot of the same problems because it is completely and wholly reliant on a permanent war economy. So any effort to go in a democratic socialist direction needs to be accompanied by serious anti-imperialism to actually incorporate, re-socialize the United States into, well, a new phase of cooperation with the world, not domination and predation. Okay, that was a long tangent. Getting back to this, my question is threefold. One, is my assessment correct that imperialism is the basis of capitalism? Answer, yes. Lenin wrote a book about it called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Two, if yes, then would not at least a temporary alliance with liberal and even reactionary forces against imperialist wars be an overall advancement for the U.S. working class? So my answer to this is most of the U.S. anti-war movement since forever has not been liberal. It has been socialist. If you go back to World War I, the idea of an anti-war movement didn't really, except for like the Quakers, didn't really exist. Eugene Debs, great socialist leader, co-founder of the IWW, Radical Labor Union, Revolutionary Labor Union, went to jail for sedition, for speaking out against World War I as an imperialist war that working class people should not support. Not a big liberal cause. Not a big liberal cause. The Vietnam War. You know, we think of the anti-war movement around the Vietnam War, which really has never been duplicated since. We think of that as like just like a force of nature. Like there was the war in Vietnam and then the massive anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam. That's not true. The Vietnam War went on for several years before there was resistance to it. And it was leftists, not liberals, who brought that about. Now, by the time the message gets out there, you know, it gets watered down. Different liberals like jump in the pot to kind of like piggyback and co-opt and sell their interests and blah, blah, blah. And I would contend that that's basically what's going on now. So the question here is because libertarians who, you know, want totally deregulated capitalism, which we've already agreed in part one, capitalism is imperialism. Libertarians state, this is part of their marketing campaign, which is, what's the word? A lie, heavily deceptive. They say that they are anti-war capitalists, which we can translate to anti-war imperialists. Do the fucking math. It's a lie. So how much are you really going to get out of these people? What I have found working in coalitions, and I've mentioned this in the last video, is the vast majority of any anti-war coalition is going to be socialists or leftists of some stripe. And then you get a few libertarian weirdos showing up. They mostly just kind of screw things up and don't work well with people. And really left to their own devices, hey, go check out a libertarian, air quotes, community. See what it's like. See what they talk about. I'm going to say it again. The anti-war thing, it's a PR thing that they pull. Anyone knows you can't, you know, it was like the Ron Paul thing. Anybody, you know, Ron Paul put out this notion, kind of taken up by Tulsi Gabbard today, continued by Tulsi Gabbard, that they will, they'll win points. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, being endorsed by Jimmy Dore, subject of why we're doing all these videos. Putting out this notion that, you know, we're anti-war, we're pro-peace, blah, blah, blah. Except here's the thing about Tulsi Gabbard. In particular, which I'm just using as an example here. We can come back to Ron Paul. Tulsi Gabbard is pro-war on terror. So they find ways to excuse it anyway, because what is the war on terror? It is a war for oil. It's a war for resources. That's all just rhetoric that they made up. So she's like, yeah, I'm against regime change wars, but I'm pro-war on terror. What? You know, it's all just about U.S. imperialist, global capitalist acting through the U.S. domination. You know that. or don't you? I don't know. But anyway, how sincere is this? How deep does it run? Ron Paul wants to tell us, or did. Oh yeah, he died, right? Anyway, Ron Paul wants to say that we can just trade with other countries. We can just trade with them. That will last all of 5 minutes before the U.S., finds some reason to, stop terrorism or whatever the fuck it is. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is there's no basis for any of this. The whole thing is based on what they call, the libertarian anti-war philosophy. The whole thing of that is based on what they call the NAP, the NAP. I think most libertarians need a NAP. The non-aggression principle. No force, no fraud. Just free dealings, voluntary transactions. Of course, they claim that capitalism is voluntary. So you can see how deep that runs. Capitalism, where you will be kicked out on the street to starve and die unless you get exploited by a capitalist for wages, etc. This is like a basic error in libertarian thinking. Beyond just not being good critical thinkers about the logical consequences of the system that they're promoting, people do want peace and stability. The libertarian world is a world of extreme uncertainty. They don't want a government. You find some, I guess, minarchist, there's, quote, anarchist libertarians, which is a total perversion of anarchism. I'm not an anarchist, but that's not anarchism. I will at least defend anarchism that far, what libertarians say, because true anarchism is against the state, against capital, and against the church, usually, as oppressive forces or institutions in society. But these, quote, right-wing libertarians are not against capital. They're just against the state getting in the way of capital, which they say, oh yeah, rising tide lifts all boats. Getting the state out of the way of capital also gets it out of the way of people. Yeah, except we had some workers' rights you just swept away. And they're like, oh, well, and I've heard this many times, libertarians saying, oh, well, I don't have a problem with labor unions. I just have a problem with the state, helping them or whatever. Yeah, as if the state is really tipping the scales towards labor unions. So basically, libertarians are like, fight me for it. They're like, we're going to get rid of the government, okay? We have the big factory and warehouse and all that stuff, and we have our hired security goons, and you all work for us. If you want to try to start a union, you're welcome to. Like, they're literally just like, fight me, bro. And, 10 years later, you're in Mad Max Part 2, The Road Warrior, because society will have just devolved. We went through this already. We went through this already around the turn of the century. The robber baron period. We had this already. We saw how it worked out. People formed labor unions. People hated it. And people wanted to go back to a system where they had rights, where you could work a job with some dignity. We come back to reinventing the need for socialism, basically. So, can you work with them in an anti-war thing? Whatever. I can't even anymore. I can't even. Just, why are people so insistent that this is a thing we can do, and that, this is the critical error of the left, is that we're not working with these fucking incel weirdo libertarians who stand for everything that we're against, except that they say that they're anti-war, even though their entire philosophy is imperialist. Just stop insisting on this. This is not the critical error we're making. It's really not. In fact, if anything, spending this much time worrying about what right-wing people think, there's your fucking error. Go be a communist. Go be an unashamed, unabashed communist in their face and say, communism will win, and fuck you, and here's our labor union, and here is our socialist political cell, and we're forming Soviets, and do it. Do it. Stop caring what they think. If they come over to it, they come over to it. But anyway, I don't know what to say anymore. Why would you target the most heavily propagandized people first? They're putting their lack of critical thinking skills on display by saying, we're imperialists who are anti-war. That person is an idiot. They're at best very confused. When I first encountered libertarianism, it took me a couple of years to just accept that it wasn't a joke, because it's so crazy. And then I realized with a great degree of horror that they were serious. I was like, no. There's got to be something I'm missing. There's got to be. No one could be this crazed. No one could be this confused. Let me save you all some time who are going through that. They're that confused. Just for right now, we'll not even get into why. Just accept that they are, please, and move on. We have a serious problem in this seriously right-wing country. No working with them is not a great idea. All right, so question 2, did I come close to answering it? If imperialism is the basis of capitalism, would not at least a temporary alliance with liberal and even reactionary forces against imperialist wars be an overall advancement for the U.S. working class? Well, see Tulsi Gabbard, they will always find a reason to support the war anyway, claiming that terrorism is a real threat to U.S. national security, whatever it is. Oops, did we grab some oil while we were in there? Oops, sorry. Just build the left. Please, just build the left. Can we make that the priority here? Building the left, rather than reaching out to people who want our actual annihilation? You know, people talk about alliances, that Lenin made after the Russian Revolution with monarchists in France to keep Germany from attacking Soviet Russia that they had just established. What's the difference? What's the difference between that scenario where Lenin was defending Soviet Russia from an attack by Germany by temporarily allying with France, and our situation as a tiny, splintered, fragmented, the U.S. left is plagued with problems. Opportunism, which is basically what we're talking about here. Working with people with whom you have a fundamental disagreement or clash of interests. What's the difference? Cue the Jeopardy music. Well, my answer would be they had already had the revolution. They had established a big thing through an armed revolution, and they were defending it from being attacked on the basis of like an entire country. I don't think that is quite the same scenario that we're in here at all. So you can't just say Lenin allied with a capitalist country once. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. You could make that analogy in other circumstances. I'm not saying there are no circumstances that would ever not be analogous to that, or that Lenin was wrong in that scenario. It's not relevant to this situation. So please stop bringing it up. I have read about that. It's not relevant to the situation. And frankly, the people who keep bringing it up, I feel like somebody told you to bring it up. Like, I don't know if you have read that yourself, because it doesn't track. It's not a good analogy. If a libertarian shows up to your anti-war alliance, keep them on a short leash. I said this in a past video. Should you be seeking them out? No, they'll probably do you more harm than good. There's my answer. Deal with it. 3, wouldn't a successful populist campaign against imperialist wars undermine our capitalist economy? No, for a lot of the reasons explained above, because they actually do more harm than good by justifying war for other reasons, and they completely skew the dialogue according to their rhetoric. So they really steal the narrative away from us. We are not powerful. This is going back to Lenin was defending Soviet Russia, an established force. We don't have a Soviet USA to operate out of. We're not strong enough to counter co-opting. It's a huge, giant problem, actually. We are not strong enough yet. Maybe we will be in 5 or 10 years if we're real lucky and work real hard. But we're not strong enough to consistently overcome that kind of co-opting. Look at the discussion we're having right now. People are like so eager to just jump into the gaping maw of the far right because they said one thing you like. It's sad. I want to give you a hug. It's like that's how desperately neglected and powerless the left is. It's horrible. But for God's sake, step back from that ledge, my friend. Don't do it. All right. And exposed to the broad working class the impossibility of having capitalism without imperialism. Dude, if you think that it's that simple to expose to the broad working class the impossibility of having capitalism without imperialism, people can look it right in the face and deny it's happening. So no, I don't think that that would be helpful to expose the country to more concentrated neoliberalism through libertarianism. Because literally, they'll just be like, we never said that. And people will be like, oh, it's just, no, we need a much more direct approach than this whole, let's give them the rope to hang themselves with. You know, let's give the Nazis the trap of state power. It's not going to work. They're going to use it not to hang themselves. I mean, okay, let's put it this way. The Nazi government eventually fell. The Italian fascist government eventually fell. Franco's Spain eventually fell. How much devastation did it cause in the meantime? We're trying to fucking avoid that. We're trying to avoid that. Would that negate the libertarian project altogether? No. You are really operating at a much higher intellectual level here. I think you're giving the general public's skills of understanding politics and society and the economy like much more credit. It's just not there. Most people will never really understand this stuff. You would need a massive socialist propaganda machine, a mass education program. You would need to like have taken enough power that we can teach kids this stuff in schools from kindergarten on up, from preschool on up. You would need to completely re-socialize people in order to be able to like have a mass understanding of this. You are not going to do it by putting libertarians in fucking power, even in an alliance or a coalition. Because, like I said, look at fucking Rand Paul. Now, granted, he's in the Republican Party, but everyone knows his father was Ron Paul. He, you know, is a libertarian, in quotes, even though he is running as a Republican. He's a piece of shit, and people don't care. Like, I mean, the people you're trying to, like, wake up, they don't care. So, no, a successful populist campaign will just bring more misery, all the kinds of things we're trying to avoid as socialists. Why would you want to leave our job of agitating and educating and propagandizing to the right? Just in the hopes that people will see through it. Like, they already have billions of dollars behind them. They're already doing that. They're pretty fucking successful. What we need now is not to give them a bigger megaphone. What we need is to organize and oppose them. That's what we need to do. All right, the comment goes on. In Letter to the American Workers, which I was talking about, Lenin talks about the temporary alliance with monarchist forces in France that was necessary to advance the Russian-Soviet working class revolution. As workers living in the imperial core, our primary contradictions are settler colonialism and imperialism. That's another question, but okay. if uniting with both apolitical people and libertarian right-wingers against those two systems can guarantee broad support. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's a big if. Actually, I think having libertarians in your coalition would probably drive more people away than it would attract people. Libertarians are not fucking popular. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like, people who know what a libertarian is, they tend not to like them. They tend to be like, not to stereotype too much, they're usually like wealthy or aspirationally wealthy people with extremely poor social skills and usually very creepy behavior. They're not like, when you're trying to get people to follow you and you get some star power or you get the cool kids, on your side. Hey, we got libertarians is not a big pitch. So no. Win over apolitical people. And this framing of if uniting with apolitical people. What? I'm not talking about uniting with apolitical people. I'm talking about turning apolitical people into socialists, educating them in socialism, getting buy-in from them on socialism. You're never going to get buy-in from libertarians on socialism. You are far more likely to get it from social democrats and apolitical people. If you can convince anyone, those are probably the most likely. And yeah, being apolitical in the USA means probably being somewhat right-wing because you've been socialized by a right-wing culture. So you've probably picked up a lot of that shit. And we as socialists not only need to sell them consciously on socialism as a good thing, but even once people join the movement as baby socialists, we've got to really work with them to strip out the U.S., right-wing socialization that we all receive. So, yeah, I don't buy the premise here of that guaranteeing broad support and even ultimate success. Well, I reject the premise. So there's your answer to that. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, the commenter adds, but didn't Lenin encourage revolutionaries to attend reactionary meetings to win workers over to the side of the revolution? 2 points here. The first point is I asked the commenter in a follow-up question, what exactly are you referring to? And they said, to go to non-revolutionary trade union meetings. The union movement, the labor movement in the U.S. is so tiny that even people in the most reactionary AFL labor union, who I guess Lenin considered right-wing, they're the far left right now of mainstream U.S. society. And about 6 or 7% of the private sector is unionized. So it's a tiny, tiny minority. Like I said, relative to the rest of society, people in a union, no matter how non-revolutionary that labor union is, they're very much on the left for the most part. So it's, again, a far cry from a right-wing anti-communist militia that, goes to the range and, shoots at targets of, socialist flags and shit. Big difference. Big difference. The commenter did concede that. But, again, you just see all these insidious, these just tentacles reaching out of, but wait, can I get buy-in from you on this point? And it's just, aren't you not a real Leninist if you don't, work with right-wing militias? No, and fuck off. It is seriously just tiring, which maybe is what you're going for. I don't know. Anyway, well, actually, they addressed that. I am asking all these questions from a sincere place. I hope we can engage in meaningful dialogue, comrade. So, again, this insistence on working with libertarians. Have you worked with libertarians? Because I feel like, at best, if that is sincere, and I'm really genuinely not convinced of that, because there's such a push to try to co-opt the left, both to, you think we're going to pull them left, they think they're going to pull us right. I just, that works both ways, okay? if you don't think we can pull Joe Biden left, yeah, we're probably also not going to pull libertarians left. And in fact, you work with them, they're probably going to pull you right. They're going to get you to abandon a lot of the core principles of socialist organizing and messaging. So this commentary just kind of went on for a while. It's just like, I had to just stop after a while because it's like, no matter what I said, they're just going to keep insisting. And it's just like, look, I encourage the rest of you to just, do that. Like, don't let these things become time sucks because you could be doing other things. So lastly, there's a comment here on a different note, switching gears now. Got really into that one. It's infuriating. It's just like, libertarians, they're not popular, they're kind of crazy, and they hate us. There is no reason why you should think they're a natural ally. They say they're against war. Guess what? They're lying. Next. Okay, moving on. So somebody wrote a comment. I'll just read the comment. Quote, "You spoke about how America is the most reactionary of all countries on the earth. I very much agree. In fact, had a very telling experience just yesterday. I don't know where you live, but I live in the Deep South. People who don't live here truly cannot understand the totality of reactionary ideology that envelops the uncountable millions." Pausing. That's what I'm saying. I'll get more into my response. Well, in my response, quote, "My experience yesterday was with my own family while visiting my sister and her children. My father, as he is a very politically engaged man, began to talk about coronavirus, which led him to Joe Biden and his want to give people money so they can avoid getting infected. My father then said that this was slavery and that Joe Biden was a communist. The logic goes, communism equals slavery to the state, welfare equals dependency to the state, therefore communism equals the welfare state. Not that Joe Biden wants a welfare state anyway. And then he supported Texan secession from the United States, said he would fight for such, and said that there were only about 2 free states remaining. Not one single person contradicted these ideas in that room of adults. They all agreed unflinchingly, without even pausing for a moment to consider his statements. And not more than a week before that, my mother compared the Biden administration to Nazi Germany because some right-wingers' freedom of speech was being suppressed. And by the way, we know that censorship is when you don't platform a libertarian. I have seen similar things from many people throughout my whole life here, and it is only now that I'm a well-developed Marxist that I'm able to see the incredible wrongness within them. When I attempt to see things from their perspective, it genuinely makes my head dizzy, for everything is made into nonsense, contradicting all historical and logical knowledge and thought processes. Comment, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's so backward, it makes your head spin. It literally does. It took me years, personally, to even accept that people thought this way. I thought it was some kind of weird joke or something. Anyway, it's not. Where were we? I have been sounding the alarm that the right wing is radicalizing and militarizing themselves in preparation and probable provocation for civil conflict and balkanization of the nation since the NRA disbanded and reformed itself under a new name in Texas, which is the state with the most total amount of guns. I think that it is a very real and unavoidable possibility that there will be a very bloody civil war once America collapses and balkanizes, that the South will become an outright fascist bloc and wage war against all who seek their own way, and that such tyranny shall be supported by untold millions. Quick comment, this is the correct approach to the U.S. right wing. Not like, oh, they're just confused. No, this is the correct approach to take. Let alone, oh, they're just confused. And, if we just pick them up and rock them in our arms for a little while, they'll come right over to socialism. We'll be able to work with them. Not in the slightest, not even a tiny bit. Okay. These who will support this possible future of fascism hold that fascism is a phenomenon exclusive to the left. And because of that belief, they can never themselves become the fascists. That is the error of their ways. No line is too far to the right for them. This is, commenting now, a key point. When you talk, especially to libertarians, they say fascism is a collectivist ideology, which to them means it's, quote, leftist. So literally everything gets called leftist to them. So they're able to completely divorce any consequences of their policies from them and scapegoat us for them. It sounds nuts because it is, but people really believe this. I'm going to read that comment again. These who will support this possible fascist future hold that fascism is a phenomenon exclusive to the left, and because of that, they themselves can never be the fascists. So, therefore, it opens up for nothing is ever too far right for them. They will step on your face while telling you it's freedom. And they won't see a contradiction in that. So I'm going to read my comment back because that was a very good comment. I'll just read my reply. Yes, for people who haven't seen the far right firsthand, it is easy to underestimate. I myself spent years reading through far right underground stuff on back alleys of the internet in the 2000s, and I found it seriously alarming what has developed in the USA. Me, I grew up in a place that was a mix of left and right. It was not too extreme in either direction. And when I saw this stuff, at first I didn't believe it. How could anyone be so stupid? I kept asking myself for literally years. I honestly couldn't believe it. The denial lasted a long time. Eventually, I was able to accept it and fully embraced far left politics. No turning back. And a lot of it was out of sheer alarm at the nightmare intensity of the right wing that I grew up not even really being aware of its existing. I believe it now, though. They are out there and they are organizing. And you are 100% right that their weird concept of what fascism is completely backward. It completely lets themselves off the hook for every wrong they can ever commit, which is part of why they're so dangerous and virtually unstoppable by normal means. You just literally can't penetrate their ideology with reason. It is deeply irrational and it flies in the face of facts. So many people have attacked me when I say things like that. And you get things like, oh, you're writing them off. They're working class people and they're just not left enough for you. They're just not pure enough for you. No, they're literally plotting to murder me. There's a difference. I am all for working with apolitical people who aren't particularly left-wing and who have accumulated a lot of psychic right-wing debris from just growing up in this country, which is racist, which is sexist, which is very classist, and everything else that is woven into the toxic, poisonous brew of U.S. capitalism. I'm for working with those people. I am not for working with the people who are trying their damnedest to advance it and who are hook, line, sinker into this and trying to pull everyone along with them. At some point, you do have to say XYZ is too far gone. And before I finish this, let me throw in another thought that I threw in the other thing. This is not the 19 teens. You don't have to go to someone's meeting to communicate with them. There is the internet now. Everyone talks to everyone all the time. You don't have to go to a library to get information. You can go on the internet, type in exactly what you want, and get at least some result. You might have to, dig into a culture for a while to find the cream, but you will get at least some basic version of it. People who are deeply right-wing today in 2021, like my channel, Socialism for All, and I'm far from the only Marxist thing on the internet. There are many. We put our stuff out. You don't have to be in the left club to fucking read it. It's also free, so you don't need any money. Like, if you want to learn about socialism and not get it from fucking PragerU, if you want to learn about it from a socialist, You can. You don't have to go to like some clandestine meeting, you know, in whatever big cities in your area and like, you know, meet down at the docks at 9 p.m. and have the right handshake. It's totally accessible. No one's writing off the idea of making information available to right-wingers at all. In fact, I would like this stuff to be taught in schools. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But I'm putting it out there on the internet for free. I don't even run ads on these videos. Thank you, as usual, to our patrons. I want people to get this information. If they don't want it, that is their choice. You have to fucking accept that. I mean, be persistent to a reasonable degree, obviously with, you know, people in your life. Don't alienate them. But like, you can't change someone else's mind. All right. So you get things like, oh, you're writing them off or whatever. But like, no, you don't get it. There's literally no reaching. Some of these people, they're so far gone. Too many on the left just have no idea. And even, again, if you get some idea, it's hard to believe it. But it does exist. And it is organizing. So I followed this up with another comment. One minor point there that your family anecdote made me think of is the reason I talk about intersectional Marxism, which it puts class first. Capitalism is the primary thing that we're facing, but also anti-racism, anti-sexism from a Marxist perspective, is that people often wonder why people in the USA are so anti-socialist, anti-communist, and why U.S. capitalism is so durable. I kind of think that the U.S. System of capitalism will probably be some of the last, if not the last, national system of capitalism standing. Could be wrong, but it's so durable because they have all these other intertwined oppressions woven into it that help keep it together. It's because it's held together with racism and patriarchy and all this other shit that reinforces it. And unless we attack and dismantle those things too, we won't be able to bring down capitalism, which is the ultimate goal. Specifically, what you said about your extremely conservative dad made me think of many families I know with a strong patriarch who cannot be questioned. Everyone is afraid to stand up to them. Just like in that example, he says this in a room full of grown-ass adults and nobody says a word. Everyone is afraid to stand up to them, and so their conservative ideas just take root and perpetuate themselves because people can often be afraid to let themselves even start to think differently for fear of consequences. You know, should the patriarch ever start going on their, you know, anti-communist fascist rant and you have the wrong expression on your face, you're not nodding in full agreement wholeheartedly enough, that can get you a beating in some households. That's a real thing. That is capitalism, a very far right, you know, very non-liberal form of capitalism, basically fascism, piggybacking off of patriarchy to, you know, be enforced and not let people have other discussions. I know someone from Idaho, this is a personal example of mine, said that the entire state was like that, which is why they left Idaho. It was just good old boys doing whatever the fuck they wanted to. And what they said was law, and everyone else in the families and towns just had to go along with it, including, incidentally, rape was part of the thing. But in general, it's just this good old boy culture that cannot be questioned, and they all just stand up for each other because, you know, they have a stake. They're by virtue of their maleness allowed to do whatever they want. It goes without saying it's fucking Idaho. They're white. Okay. Not exactly an environment where you can really question power relations comfortably, which can take years, even under the best and most supportive of circumstances, and considerably longer, a much slower process when you're afraid to let your mind wander from what the man says, even for a second. It's a very real thing, and again, part of you know, how is U.S. capitalism so durable? So the commenter replied, quote, "We must also highlight their grave misunderstanding of communism in addition to fascism. while there is no limit to however far right they, through however many obscurities, wish to go. There is also simultaneously no amount how left they can allow themselves to go, since they have no understanding by any degree of what communism and socialism, or even at times capitalism, are. I would, commenting, say most of them really couldn't define capitalism. Some maybe could, many couldn't. Or who believes what about such, or how such are to be implemented and how such functions. They, at the drop of a pin, call anything that is not from the hand or mouth of a homophobic, misogynistic, lying, racist, pathetic wannabe king communist. Like, that's just the default. Anytime someone deviates from, you know, what King Pig says, it's communist. They have no definition of communism and no ability to accurately point out what is communist and what isn't. To them, even helping the lowest percentile of the poor is communism. To them, not policies, but the people who propose and support them are what makes something communists. To them, communism is what threatens their candidate. It is their boogeyman in every closet, under every bed, in every dark corner, through every window, behind every door, crawling at the center of every spider web. To them, everywhere lurks the levitating phantom of communism haunting eternally. Well put. If you read through, this person talked about the Deep South, you read through Southern like evangelist propaganda, tons of stuff about that. It needs to be confronted. It ultimately is a real danger, and it really needs to be confronted. If people aren't made aware of how real this is, you get these utterly naive people being like, yeah, they're anti-war, man. They're literally just saying that to try to disarm you because, as another commenter said, there's no need to infiltrate when being subversive will work just as well. When they can walk freely among you and they don't even have to pretend to be other than what they are, they've already won. They have subverted your anti-fascism. And on that note, you know, don't be that person. Don't let your anti-fascism be subverted. Let your socialist flag fly. We need to organize. We need to build a socialist movement. And we're not going to do that by embracing far-right militias. Should go without saying, but not according to the comments sometimes. Hopefully at some point, soon, you know, we'll reach a better understanding. That's it for the video. Thank you for listening. And that's the video. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen or just support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/socialism4all and sign up for a monthly donation. You can also follow us at facebook.com/socialism4all. Used to have a page at FOR all, and it got throttled to death by Zuck. Here on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe button, and the notifications bell. Please leave a comment if you can, and please share our video wherever you're online, your Twitter feed, your Discord servers, Reddit subs, etc. All of that helps more people to see this content, whether it's in the YouTube algorithm or just posting it on other sites. All of that's helpful. All of you out there supporting and promoting this content makes it all go that much more smoothly. We need to end capitalism, normalize talking about socialism today, and it's really kind of our only hope for a better tomorrow. Thanks for all you do, and we will catch you in the next video.